Before we start this video, I want to give a disclaimer. I know, second video in a row. Due to certain reasons, this script was made a while ago and before some updates. Mainly escalation of freedom. Fortunately, I don't go too in-depth with numbers, and most updates seem to add new things instead of changing them, but to make it up to you, I'll release a bonus review about the most recent updates in the next few weeks. Alright, hello citizens of Super Earth, Isaac here. Welcome aboard the SES Marshal of Family Values. So, we're finally here. This video has been in the making for a long time. Hopefully too many other reviews haven't came out and people won't accuse me of ripping off their favorite creator. Today we're talking about Helldivers 2, which is possibly, and I don't say this lightly, one of my favorite games of all time. My game tastes are as volatile as my music taste, but horde shooters have always had a place in my heart. This game takes inspiration from a lot of things I like, and wears it proudly. This video is made with passion, and I've been playing this game since March, so this isn't going to be some short video with the sole purpose of profiting off the trend. In this video, I'm going to talk about why I love this game, and if that convinces you to buy it, explain things that I wish I knew to get you on your feet and protect you from potential gatekeepers. But I'm not going to go too in-depth because we don't have all day. The devs are insane and keep adding and changing things, and I think that players should learn from their own experiences and develop their own loadout and strategy. First, let's talk about the world building, which may not seem important, but once you see how the game does it, you'll see why it needs a whole section. When I first got the game, I had no idea about the lore, but I learned it very quickly for two reasons. One, it's pretty simple and can be summed up in 4 words, and 2, environmental storytelling. This game uses environmental storytelling immaculately. From the intro to random NPC dialogue, random notes you can find, these random broadcasts, armor descriptions, and you can't forget the loading screen tips that are more propaganda if anything. The environmental storytelling isn't all for some deep lore, and can have some areas that would make Half-Life 2 blush. On the map, there are these places called points of interest. Most of the time, these are just places to get supplies and samples, but sometimes they can contain great bits of environmental storytelling. My favorite example is this one where this soldier was ambushed while burying his friend, and managed to finish the bug off with his shovel before succumbing to his wounds. There's a lot of last stand areas like this. While this game is in no way character-focused, there are a few characters in the game that deserve a section about them. First, let's talk about the stars of the show, the Helldivers. A lot of people say that this is like Starship Troopers the game. I am so sorry, Extinction, you did not deserve this fate. If the Starship Troopers are supposed to be the US military, then the Helldivers are like the Knights Templar. Never before has I played as such a manic, zealous, government-mandated sociopath. They use the words liberty and democracy like they're divine, and I love it. Another thing I have to mention about the Helldivers, and don't tell Super Earth I told you this, is how expendable they are. For starters, you are literally shot into the planet, not gently dropped from low orbit where you land safely due to some high-tech cushioning. In Helldivers 2, you are fired from your destroyer in a oversized bullet called a Hell Pod, with nothing to slow you down other than some guidance thrusters. You go so fast that the pod embeds in the ground, and you raise up all cool looking. Speaking of Hell Pods, when you inevitably die, you get reinforced in a Hell Pod. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty much a revive, but in the lore, they're pretty much just sending down a new Helldiver. In fact, you can go to your corpse. The final nail in the coffin is that even if you run out of reinforcement budget and all die, as long as you completed the main objective, it will still count as a success. In the lore, democracy officers are like thought police, but in the game, he's pretty much your personal hype man. Although he may be an eldritch being, and don't make him mad or he will launch a continuous artillery barrage until you die, because invisible walls and kill zones are cringe. Although you never see him, mission control stays up on the destroyer and will notify you of things relevant to the mission.
Be advised, the enemy high-priority target is near your position,
while also acting as a sentient timer. Up next is Eagle 1. She flies the plane that gives you air support. You can tell from her voice lines that she is very eager to, drop napalm danger close. Also, the community, really likes her. Now, these two don't do much, so I'm gonna group them together. Both the shipmaster and service technician serve the same role of keeping the ship running and giving some world-building dialogue. The shipmaster will also have dynamic voice lines after every mission, like, "Friendly fire is a sad reality of war," or, "Wow, we didn't need to send any reinforcements." Finally, and I save the best for last, is the man, the myth, Pelican 1. If no one got me, I know he got me. Like any good pelican, he scoops you up for extraction. Pelican Second one is probably my favorite character. He seems like the only person who actually cares about the Helldivers' survival. There's also the morale boost of hearing his voice over the radio and seeing him descend from the sky in a flurry of autocannon fire. Oh, he's also canonically married to Eagle One. This doesn't have any significance. This is just something one of the devs said online randomly, probably an attempt to keep the Coomers at bay. Instead of a traditional main menu, in Helldivers 2 you have the Super Destroyer, because everything in this game has the prefix super in front of it. Super Earth, Super Citizen, Super PTSD. When you get unfrozen, you step out into the hangar/engineering bay. But before we walk around, let's look at our keyboard. Yes, we are using the PC controls. Cry about it. Pressing escape will open this. Up top you have your traditional settings, to the left you have lobby control, to the right you have your personal order, which is like a daily quest that can range from being able to complete in a single mission without even noticing to downright sadistic. You also have your major order, which every player makes progress for. Leaving the pause menu, you can press C, which will show you modifiers. These can be global for all players, planetary like extreme temperature, or operation modifiers such as jamming systems or anti-air emplacements. Pressing Z will give you updates about new major orders or weapons, so it's like a dev newsletter, but actually interesting to read. The final key you can press is R. That will open the shop. Tab 1 is like the Fortnite Battle Pass, but not evil. This is where you'll be getting most of your things, at least in the beginning. Items are bought with medals that can be found during missions or awarded for completing operations and major/minor orders. These medals can't be bought, so you can't even try to pay to win. It's divided into separate war bonds, with the main one that everyone has access to, and separate, much smaller war bonds that usually revolve around a single theme, like electricity or explosives. These do need to be bought, but stay forever, so there's none of that FOMO BS. The next tab is a superstore, which is where you can buy armor. These aren't like skins, they all have different stats, and don't show up in the war bond. Finally, we have the super credit tab with... One of the main things that made me get this game was that someone told me there was no microtransactions. That is a lie. The currency in this game are called super credits and are used to purchase war bonds and armors. Okay, that sounds bad. It's pretty easy to get through war bonds, and you can find them during missions. The only time I spent money was to get this piece of armor when the shop was about to cycle. This isn't because of FOMO or anything. The shop gives you 48 hours. I was just indecisive and slow. Besides, it was only $2. I do have some gripes though. You usually find the same amount of credits regardless of difficulty. My other gripe is that if you're not a hardcore gamer, it can take a while to unlock a war bond. If I'm talking about microtransactions, I should also talk about the Super Citizen Edition. This is the game's premium pass, however, it provides no unobtainable gameplay advantage, because that's what good developers do. Think of it as a tip, or more accurately, funds for the CEO's Warhammer models. This pass contains some nice armor, a cape, a title that might get you made fun of, an exclusive SMG, which might seem contradictory, but is balanced by being worse than the stock SMG in every way. The pass also gives you a head start on one of the war bonds, and access to the Stratagem hero minigame that loses its novelty after one playthrough because of hackers. I wouldn't really suggest buying it. Like I said, think of it more as a tip. I mean, I only bought it so I could get footage of the SMG. White people when there's disposable income at the function. Leaving all those menus and finally using our legs, we can see that we're in the engineering/hangar bay. Across from us is the ship management terminal, where you can buy new stratagems with requisition that's awarded for completing missions and objectives. You can also use samples you find during missions, ranging from common that are found at pretty much every POI, to super rare that you need to lock in when you get, because they only spawn rarely in high difficulty missions, and you will never forgive yourself if you lose these. These samples are used to research upgrades, such as removing non-vital components from your strike craft to allow it to carry more bombs. This is also where you can change your ship's name. Moving through the corridor, you'll find the arsenal of democracy is massive and ever expanding. We got assault rifles, battle rifles, marksman rifles, SMGs, pump shotguns, slug shotguns, auto shotguns, Warhammer 40k bolt gun. You want it? It's yours, my friend. I really like the secondaries in this game because they function how sidearms should function, as in you only pull them out when you can't use your primary and need to shoot quickly. I've gone entire missions without using my secondary. Normally, you have two pistols, the Peacemaker and the Redeemer. You might look at the Redeemer and think that it's just a machine pistol with piss poor damage and recoil. In actuality, the Redeemer is better than the Peacemaker in every way. You can even fire it semi-auto, so there's no excuse to use the Peacemaker. The other pistols each come from a war bond and are based off the theme. The old-fashioned veterans get a revolver, the high-tech exosuits get a laser pistol, that sucks by the way, the explosive freaks get the grenade pistol, which contradicts my whole sidearm spiel, and the Arctic Commandos get a deagle. I should also mention that all the pistols and SMGs are one-handed. That doesn't mean you can dual wield. yet. What it means is that you can fire behind you while moving and also able to shoot while holding things like important data or a ballistic shield, which is very underrated. Most grenades in this game are what you'd expect: frag, impact, incendiary, smoke, flashbang, etc. There are also some more direct damage, like the throwable war crime, that is the thermite grenade, and also a big knife. Although there are 3 loadout slots, there's actually 2 other slots that are called in during a mission. The first of these are support weapons. These can pack a big punch, but have limited ammo capacity, meaning you need to use them wisely. Some examples include, but are not limited to, LMGs, anti-material rifles, grenade launchers, rocket launchers, recoilless rifles, flamethrowers, and much more. Some of those weapons I mentioned have very large ammunition that you can't just store in your pockets, so this is where the final slot comes in: backpacks. When you call in certain support weapons, they'll also come with an ammo backpack. Being on a backpack, reloading can be very long, but there's a reason why the backpack is separate: friendship. If someone has the ammo backpack while someone else is holding the support weapon, you can do an assisted reload that is considerably shorter, like in real life. The backpacks don't just store support ammo though, they can also store drones, resupply packs, or ballistic shield. This slot can also be taken up by a shield generator or jump pack. I really like the gunplay in this game because, in my opinion, it hits that perfect balance between arcade and realistic. It's not like Arma 3 where every bullet goes through millions of calculations to be as realistic as possible. It's kind of like Ready or Not or Payday the Heist, where you still have to worry about armor and your bullets are limited and also magazine based. Speaking of magazines, you obviously lose all the bullets when reloading, and you only have a guess as to how many bullets are in the magazine. If you want to see the exact amount, you have to hold the reload button. This is also how you can toggle the flashlight, change the firing mode, and adjust the scope if applicable. There are also little things that add to realism, like backblast, and if you reload with a bullet in the chamber, it still counts. The second tab is armor. Armor is divided into 3 classes: light, medium, and heavy. I don't need to explain how they work, but I do want to warn against heavy armor. There are a few wave defense missions where it's good, but most missions have big areas, and there aren't any transport vehicles yet, so you have to like it. Something I should explain is how armor passives work. Every armor comes with a passive effect, such as more grenades or heals, further throwing range, electric insulation, or pulling a Sisters of Battle and just refusing to die out of pure xenophobia. This passive is also the only way to get this achievement. There are others, but it is also important to note that passives are available to all armor classes. Don't be like me and think that heavy padding is exclusive to heavy armor. There are also helmets which don't actually affect your armor. You've also got capes, which are like this game's versions of DRG's beards. We've come full circle and capes are cool again. They have great detail, like flowing in the wind, getting torn up, or lighting on fire. Speaking of effects on armor, you can get covered in gore, which always leads to the situation where you're like, yeah, I'm covered in blood! Wait, the enemies in this game bleed only green and oil. Oh. One complaint I have is that you can crawl through as much mud as you want, but your armor stays pristine. I want some all quiet on the Western Front type mud. If we're talking about armor, I should also mention how health works. There are 2 different health systems: a standard system at the bottom left and a limb health system. Every limb has health, and if it takes enough damage, it cripples, similar to Fallout. Legs reduce speed, arms reduce accuracy, and body causes you to bleed out. If you die while taking enough damage to cripple a limb, it detaches from your corpse, leading to some very brutal deaths. To prevent this, we have delicious, non-addictive stims. Jab one of these into your neck and you'll regenerate all your health and limbs while also getting a nice stamina boost. If you think of stims as just a healing item, you're not thinking democratically. Because of the super fast regeneration and stamina boost, you should really think of them as 2 seconds of infinite health and stamina. This may not seem like much time, but this has saved my life multiple times. Coming back to armor, there's a very important rule every player needs to follow.
The rule? Oh, cool. This game follows a yellow and black aesthetic. Now, while I'm personally a huge fan of red and black, if you couldn't tell, I really have with the, let's call it Tactical Bumblebee. To be fair, after the first 2 sets of armor, they just completely stop following this rule and do whatever they want with the colors.
There are some awesome looking armor sets, some more inspired than others. I did say that the helmets and capes are purely cosmetic, but this does not give you the excuse to use only the base helmet and cape. Our enemies may have superior numbers and weapons, but what they don't have is superior fashion. If you see a piece of armor that looks super drippy, but its passive goes against your build, then change your build. I made a rule for myself that I can't have armor and a helmet from the same set, and so far it's been going very well. This third tab is going to be a lightning round, so I can get to the cool things quicker. Helldivers are androgynous because the only thing in my pants is democracy. Voice 4 is Yuri Lowenthal, my beloved. Hug is the best emote, and if you use Scout Handshake, I'll find you. All the victory poses are cool, and I like the Slav squat. The player card selection is good for taking screenshots, and I don't know what to say for title. Whew. The final room is the bridge. Up top are the hell pods you load into to start a mission, and a viewing window for taking all your cool screenshots. Down here you've got your galaxy map where you access missions. Actually, I've been throwing around a lot of words, so I'll explain right now. You start with the galactic map. The map is divided into sectors with a couple planets. Each planet has operations that cover an area that has missions in it, and in every mission you need to complete objectives. Now that I've cleared everything up, let's talk about how you go about completing missions. When you load into your hell pod, you see the mission map that shows you objectives, areas of high enemy concentration, and the designated extraction zone. The best place to land is usually on the objective. The game tries to stop this by having enemies there, but as I said in the beginning of the video, you deploy in giant steerable bullets. The objectives in this game can fall under 3 categories: go to a place and destroy things, go to a place and defend things, or stay in a small area and defend against waves. Another thing that affects objectives is difficulty. Take the launch ICBM mission for example. On low difficulties, you just have to go to the launch site and launch it, but on higher difficulties, you have to get the launch codes, activate the power, and then launch it. Speaking of difficulty, this game gets bonus points because instead of just being lazy and buffing enemy health and damage at higher difficulties, they instead spawn more advanced enemies and with higher numbers. Enemies will start spawned at objectives, POIs, and outposts. Outposts are where enemies spawn periodically and can range from a hole in the middle of nowhere to a heavily fortified factory complex. Enemies will also appear in patrols which spawn randomly and are not controlled by the devs. While you can easily take out patrols with the element of surprise, their real danger comes from the reinforcements they can call in. This and other reasons such as limited supplies give rise to stealth as a tactic. There are people online that will call you a coward. Those people have not played difficulty 9. Sneaking is great for either devastating ambushes or just avoiding patrols outright. In fact, you can play the whole game in stealth. I know I call this game a horde shooter, but there's nothing stopping you from bringing light scout armor with a high damage precision primary and playing it like it's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. In fact, it's pretty fun. Tactical objectives are like optional side objectives that actively benefit you. I'm sure this oil is valuable to someone, but I'd much rather have a radar station that shows me everything on the map. Tactical objectives consist of structures that either belong to the enemy and can do things like disable air support, obscure your vision, spawn special enemies, shell you, and more. On the other side, all these planets were once under human control, and you can find abandoned military infrastructure that can help you in your mission. One example is this abandoned artillery piece that you reactivate and load with shells, ranging from smoke to nuclear bombs. Make sure you remember which order you load the shells. There are also 3 specific objectives that don't fit into these 2 categories. My game theory is that because these are the main objectives exclusive to trivial and easy difficulties, and people don't play low difficulties after a couple days of playing, but the devs didn't want to waste all the effort they spent on them, so they turned them into tactical objectives. These are really easy to complete, consisting of waiting around an escape pod and doing nothing for 30 seconds, a broadcast tower spewing horrible propaganda. This is supposed to be a tense hacking sequence while the broadcast draws an enemy patrols, but you can just blow it up. The final fake tactical objective is a research station run by rogue humans. You don't see any corpses, so they're probably still inside the building, and the amount of tactical objectives scales with difficulty, and the game chooses only 1 to show on your map, with the rest not showing up. They aren't that hard to find. You can see them from a distance. Some are easy to spot on the map, and sometimes they're guarded, so you can just find them in those red areas with high enemy concentration. Upon mission completion, a beacon will be sent down to the extraction zone that was designated before the start of the mission. These are usually abandoned bases, but if those aren't available, it'll be a rocky but open area. Once you reach the beacon and input the code, it will send a bright beam into the sky, signaling Pelican 1, but also causing every nearby patrol to come and investigate. Remember, enemy strength and number scales with difficulties, so extraction can range from sitting around and doing nothing to apocalyptic hordes that make World War Z look like a Canadian protest. Once Pelican 1 arrives, he'll fly around a little bit and then land. The second someone enters the shuttle, a 20-second countdown starts, and then he'll leave with or without you. So please don't be that guy that immediately boards while the rest of your squad are actually doing things. Speaking of extraction etiquette, some people get really mad when you call in airstrikes on the shuttle while leaving for cinematic effect. Don't listen to them. This tactic can get you a good amount of kills and, most importantly, looks really cool. You have to remember that the Helldivers are based off of the Starship Troopers and thus love their publicity. I wouldn't be surprised if it was revealed that you view this whole extraction sequence from a camera drone, and you don't want to disappoint the people back home. I can understand the pain of losing all your samples to some moron who called an artillery barrage while you were defending. That's called griefing. Don't group us with those people. You see, we follow a process. When the shuttle is landed and everyone is ready to leave, stand next to the entrance with the beacon armed and wait for everyone else to enter. Once they do, throw the beacon and enter the shuttle quickly. See? Not that hard. There's no real reason not to do a full tour around the map and hit everything. Outposts have samples and destroying them means there'll be less enemies. POIs have every currency in the game and also have resupplies. And the help tactical objectives give is usually worth it. Not to mention you also get a higher mission rating and you don't want to disappoint anyone. There is one reason, and those are blitz missions. These only give you 12 minutes to destroy a certain amount of outposts, and unless you split up, you're going to be really strapped for time. Oh wait, I forgot to talk about mission time. Yeah, so it turns out keeping a massive starship in low orbit over a small region with heavy enemy presence is not good for its continued survival. Every mission has a time limit that's shown in the top right of your screen. Besides blitz missions, this shouldn't be a concern unless you're doing a whole bunch of lollygagging. Once the mission timer hits 0, the destroyer dips, and with that all your support because the destroyer is your gun platform and hangar. You can still use ground-based assets like artillery though. The most important thing that you lose access to are reinforcements, meaning that once you die, you can't respawn. Everyone abandons you, except for the legend himself, Pelican One, who will execute an emergency extraction where he will immediately begin descending to the extraction zone regardless of mission completion. Once he lands, the 20-second countdown immediately begins, and if you missed that, I hope you saved a bullet for yourself because no one is coming to get you and there are some very horrific fates in store for you. Also, word of warning, make sure that the primary objective is one of the last things you do because after it's completed, patrols become much more frequent and aggressive. More importantly, mission control does not shut up. Now let's talk about one of the two things that turns this game from a decent horde shooter to Game of the Year material. Can I just say I absolutely love air support? I don't know if it's just like a guy thing, but the Call of Duty AC-130 missions were always my favorite. There's just something so satisfying about marking an enemy position and watching them get turned into ash, or having an entire forward base dropped on your position. Pretty much anything that can deliver express death to your enemies. Every stratagem has a code that you input by holding control to pull out a stratagem beacon and pressing the directional inputs for the one you want. It might seem weird to play Friday Night Fun. It might seem weird to play DDR to call in support, but the muscle memory kicks in after a few days. It's a good way to have numerous codes without overwhelming the player with a bunch of controls. The codes were also intentionally designed so that the quick and relatively weak stratagems are simple, while the powerful ones are long and complex. Also, if you use a macro, then you're a little bitch. Once you input the correct code, it arms the beacon. The beacon is conveniently ball-shaped and very throwable. If you're not careful, the beacon can roll, bounce, and generally end up in places hazardous to your health. I would bet good money that stratagem mishaps have the highest kill count. Another important thing to note is that the environment can seriously mess up attacks. Once the beacon lands, it shoots a pillar of light into the sky. Red for lethal and blue for non-lethal, or more accurately, soon to be lethal. In the menu, stratagems are represented by 4 colors. Blue for support, which is any form of equipment. This is how you get your heavy weapons and backpacks. Now, support stratagems obviously aren't meant for direct damage, but they are deployed in hell pods, and okay, I promise this is the last time. The hell pods are oversized bullets shot from space. They do more damage than certain conventional stratagems, and killing big enemies with them is a widely used tactic. In fact, there's an achievement for it. Not all stratagems are from hell pods. The 2 frankly overhated exosuits in the game are obviously too big and need to be carried on by Pelican One himself. Also, don't think too long about how it takes him upwards of 4 minutes to arrive at extraction, but he can deploy an exosuit in under 10 seconds. Up next is green for defense. These also come in hell pods, but have a much more direct effect. Ignoring the shield relay, these exist to deny an area from an enemy through sentry turrets with a very high friendly fire rate, mines that will make this area uninhabitable for future generations decades after the war has ended, and whatever this is. You've got yellow for mission stratagems that, unlike other stratagems, are pre-selected for you. You have your essentials like resupply, reinforce, and SOS beacon, which makes your mission ping on the mission map and gives you priority in quick join. Certain objectives also have special stratagems. For example, the geological survey objective has a special stratagem for deploying the drill. There's also the hell bomb, which is probably the most destructive stratagem in the game, but you won't be using it offensively because you need to activate it manually. These are for destroying stationary targets like enemy tactical objectives and some main objectives. Last and most certainly not least are the red offensive stratagems. These are the meat and potatoes of stratagems, and while detractors may call them war crimes, when your opposition consists of building-sized cockroaches that hunger for human flesh and Skynet's younger brother, you take all you can get. These come in 2 flavors, Orbital and Eagle. Orbital stratagems are fired from the Super Destroyer, which contains enough munitions to conquer a couple third-world countries. Orbital stratagems have the advantage of being deadly and precise, most of the time. However, coming from orbit, they take relatively long to impact and often have long cooldowns. On the opposite side, none of your enemies have invested in any form of air superiority, so Eagle 1 can just sit around and execute attacks almost instantly. You may think this is balanced by them being weak, but things like the cluster bomb, which is my favorite stratagem in the game, can destroy hordes of infantry. She can also punch above her weight with things like rocket pods and the beloved 500 kilogram bomb. The drawback comes from the Eagle fighter having limited capacity, so she has to return to the destroyer to resupply. I would suggest bringing carrying a combination of orbital and eagle stratagems. Let's finally talk about what you use all these weapons and tactics on. I'm also going to be using some terminology for classifying units. Chaff units are small and weak and can die to a single hit from most weapons. As you could guess, they're dangerous in swarms or if you're careless. Light units make up the majority of enemy forces and have higher health but still no real armor. Medium units have armor that can be countered by armor-piercing munitions or explosives. Heavy units, also called elites, have, well, heavy armor that can only be pierced by dedicated anti-tank munitions. These guys have big blips on the minimap and are pretty scary to new players. The final unit type are super heavies. There are only 2 of these units in the game, but they require coordination and stratagems to take down. Up first, we have the Termanids. Their totally uninspired name is sort of long, so we call them bugs. I don't know if that's technically a slur. I hope it is. For some quick lore, upon death, these guys decompose into a substance called element 710, which is a great alternative to oil. So yes, we are committing mass genocide and creating thousands of bug orphans for oil. If that's not a metaphor for America and the Middle East, then I don't know what is. Gameplay-wise, they use their claws and acid. This standard for space bugs. If you're an edgy contrarian who wants to self-fillet himself over not being a sheep, this makes the game unplayable. Cause, you know, Dr. Dickhead over here is an expert in game design. Editing Isaac here. Just to show you how long ago I started this script, this part was originally making fun of Dead Rob, which was supposed to be like a NFT Escape from Tarkov. The doc had a hand in creating it and adamantly defended it. It went the way of most Web3 projects backed by Egomaniac and died before it was released. Anyway, if you've been living under a rock, Dr. Disrespect, a man with a wife and child, was caught sending inappropriate messages to a minor. Termanids have 3 basic castes and start as small chaff units, with the heavier enemies being older and more matured versions. I designed this graph here to help visualize. Starting with the chaff, we have the scavenger. These guys are super weak and can't even swarm you because of the low population cap. They can do some damage if they manage to flank you, but the real threat comes from if just one of these guys manages to run off, you can call reinforcements from underground. The bile spitter can, well, spit. The spit doesn't do that much damage, but it does slow you at often the worst times. The pouncer is even weaker than the scavenger, but can use its underdeveloped wings to close the distance with you rapidly. The bug itself isn't very dangerous. The pounce is telegraphed from a mile away, and when it does land, it just stands there awkwardly. The real danger is from their proximity to you. Stratagems like sentries, drones, and the orbital laser don't care about friendly fire and will open fire on them. If you're savvy with incendiary weapons, then you may find yourself surrounded by angry fireballs. Stratagem beacons also have the tendency to stick to them. Moving on to light units, we have the warrior. It's simple, just like its juvenile version. The only notable feature is that when you shoot its head off, it has a chance to do a final charge. This is pretty easy to counter with a single melee hit. While the Biocast doesn't have any light units, there is a hybrid unit called the Bio Warrior. It may sound and look cool, but in actuality, it's kinda lame. It can't shoot acid or anything. Its only special ability is to explode into acid upon death. This may seem cool, but we have guns, and if it's close enough to splash you with acid, then you've got bigger problems. The Pouncer grows up to become the Hunter, which is my least favorite enemy in the game. Much like their namesake, they'll leap at you from far away, but unlike the Pouncers, will actually hit you, covering you in acid and leaving you open to their freaky tongue. These guys also have a shred of intelligence and will flank and dodge bullets. The sound they make when they're alerted has entered my nightmares. After the Hunter, we got the Stalker. The Stalker is the final form, is superior to the Hunter in every way. It can take and deal more damage, leap further, and even go invisible. The reason why I don't hate them as much as the Hunters is because due to certain abiotic factors, they are exceedingly rare. Not only that, they can only spawn in specialized layers that count as tactical objectives. Now, I just said Stalkers are the final stage of Hunter evolution, so you might be wondering who these bat-looking guys are. Those are called Shriekers. These guys have fully developed wings due to a mutation that was completely natural and had absolutely nothing to do with all the noxious chemicals we pumped into the air. Definitely. These guys are more annoying than dangerous, as they, well, shriek a lot, and their method of attack is to swarm above you and take turns diving down and taking chunks out of your health. If you lay prone, it's almost impossible for them to hit you, and the incendiary shotgun cuts through them like a hot pellet through chitin. Fortunately, these guys stay close to their hives, which are very weak to hell bombs. Well, there was a time when they roamed free, but we'll talk about that later. Moving on to medium, we got the Hive Guard. These guys are like the warriors if their head was replaced by a block of heavy chitin. These are the player's first introduction to medium armor and are super easy to fight. These guys are much less aggressive than their younger counterparts, preferring to stay back and hunker down. The Bile Cast splits into the Bile Spewer and the rare Nursing Spewer. They both function exactly the same as armored slow-moving units that you don't want to be in front of for too long. On higher levels, they can act as mortars and not even try to hide the Starship Trooper's inspiration. Besides color, the Nursing Spewer is slightly smaller and has these egg sacs, so we got a case of sexual dimorphism.
Editing Isaac here again. This is wrong. I still believe the sexual dimorphism thing
But I was wrong about these two having identical gameplay. They both spew bile, but the Nursing Spewer is actually only a light unit with much weaker armor. I didn't know this because these two are always shoot on sight with the heaviest weapons I have. I only found out about this after randomly browsing the wiki. Going down to the heavy units, we got another case of sexual dimorphism. Well, I'm not 100% sure. The split could have happened earlier or the genders could be mixed up, but I'm offering off the basis that in most cases, insects with leadership roles in the community are female, so that's why I think the Brood Commander is female. Speaking of her, she can barely be considered a heavy unit, having this weird reinforced intermediary between light and medium armor that conventional bullets sometimes penetrate and other times ricochet off, but she has a big blip on the minimap, so she's a heavy. She functions as a warrior, but bigger, stronger, faster, and more deadly, while also being able to call in a mini bug breach that summons warriors and hive guards. She can also charge you to quickly close the distance. Speaking of charging, we got the Charger. This name kind of betrays him because he's less of a dumb brute that runs in a straight line and more of an angry mass of bulletproof chitin that can ruin your day. This guy is one of the deadliest Termanids in the game, but I don't hate him like the Hunter because of, let's call it, mutual respect. I mean, when I die to a Hunter, it feels like total BS, but when I die to a Charger, I feel like I deserved it. Since these guys are so deadly, and I love you, I'll give you some advice. Wherever you go, he will always find you. So the only tactic available is kiting. He'll do a little bull thing before charging, but whatever you do, don't dive to avoid his charge. It may seem like he was perfectly designed for this, but he likes to do this little head jerk thing, and yeah. If you're with a team, you can run circles around him while someone else takes him out. If you're a Sigma male that doesn't need teammates, then bait him into something like a wall while doing this big C maneuver. When it comes to killing him, the big orange bulb on his back is a trick to make you think this is another game, because for whatever reason, damage from non-explosive weapons there is divided by 10, making a tiny drop in his massive pool of health. Your first line of defense should be offensive stratagems. These guys are the reason why I always bring an orbital rail cannon or laser. Eagle rocket pods are also good, albeit inconsistent. If you don't have access to those, the simple tactic is a well-placed headshot with a dedicated anti-tank weapon. The other tactic is to destroy one of its legs' armor and concentrate fire. After the Charger, we got the Behemoth. These guys function the same way as the Chargers, but are more yoked. I wouldn't be surprised if you've never seen these guys before, because he only shows up as a target for elimination objectives and also during civilian evacuation missions for some reason. Most tactics that work on Chargers work on him, with the only difference being that instead of killing him, some tactics will make him enter his bleed out phase. Oh yeah, I should probably explain what that is. If a Charger or a Behemoth takes enough damage to the abdomen, it will appear cut up and bloody. This means that it's entered its bleed out phase and you can stop attacking it as it will die in about 10 seconds. Now for the super heavy. Remember when I made fun of the Bile Warrior? Well, he took that personally and he went to the gym. It really worked and now he's the most powerful Terminid in the game. Everyone, meet the Bile Titan. These Titans are very fast for their size and their main attack is like the Bile Spewer but much more concentrated. If the Beetle from Starship Troopers comes to mind, then you're on the right track. It's best to bait out its attack and then run perpendicular to it. You can also get close to it so it can't hit you, but watch out for those legs because getting impaled by them is an insta-kill. The only stratagems that can kill are direct hits from the 500 kilogram bomb or mini nuke artillery shell. These don't track, so are almost impossible to hit it if it's moving. You can't hit it with offensive stratagems, and I suggest indiscriminate anti-tank fire to the head. Fun fact, when it opens its mouth to spew bile, if you're quick and precise enough, you can fire a recoilless rifle right into its mouth and blow its head clean off, just like in the opening cinematic. Moving to the left, we have the Automatons, or bots. These guys are much more difficult than their bug counterpart because they have better technology and function more like you. If you're into theories, this is because they were you. Well, that's one of the many theories. All we know for certain about these guys is that they're from the snowy waste of a planet called Cyberstan, don't like the fact that humanity exists, and also have access to Twitter for some reason. The advice I always give is, these guys have guns. I know that sounds simple, but with the bugs you could just run out in the open and kite the horde. If you try it with the bots, you're dead. It's like a completely different game when you have to take things like cover and indirect fire into account when fighting a near-peer combined arms adversary. Being metal, these guys are resistant to fire. Well, they can die to fire, but just save yourself the hassle. Don't bring flame stratagems on bot missions. Another thing that differentiates them from the bugs is that they use heavy armor a lot more, but graduated top of their class in Bad Guy University and have big glowing weak spots. They're also packed with explosives, so you don't want to be close to them, and it also leads to some very cinematic scenes. Since they have an actual military structure instead of the bigger the unit, the more powerful, I spent way too long making this table. This Isn't it beautiful? Starting with the infantry, these guys make up the main automaton force and are very modular. Starting off, we have the trooper. Troopers resemble gaunt, skeletal humanoids, so as you could guess, they are very fragile. A few shots, center mass, or even melee strikes can decommission these guys. What they lack in strength, they make up for in numbers and modularity. These guys can carry rifles, pistols, machine guns, cannons, rocket launchers, jetpacks. They can even get their arms replaced with swords. I should also mention the commissar. While it shares the same body as the trooper, its programming is completely different. While all troopers will call for reinforcements if they're being overwhelmed and not actively suppressed, when the commissar sees something even vaguely resembling a human, it will immediately run off and fire a signal flare.
Almost. He is here. I sense it.
So yeah, these guys are priority targets. Next with the Devastators, and stop me if you heard this before. The Devastators are an upgraded version of the Troopers with better weapons and medium armor, but don't fully replace them because of the cost and general bulk. These guys are covered in medium armor, so easily fall into things like the laser and autocannon, but you can also destroy their unarmored head if you're accurate. Their arm cannons, although inaccurate, can be deadly, and their fists can give you a dirt nap if you get too close. Just like the Trooper, they are modular and can be outfitted with much deadlier weapons. First we got the Rocket Devastator, who got the T-34 treatment. I've lost a lot of comrades to these guys and their indiscriminate rocket barrages. There's also the Heavy Devastator that, as the name implies, is kind of an in-between of medium and heavy infantry. They have a massive heavy shield that isn't that protective because it may be heavy armor, but the Devastator chassis isn't exactly built for something that heavy, so even if a projectile doesn't penetrate the shield, the sheer force will knock it backwards. This guy's real threat comes from the machine gun that replaces its standard arm cannon, which will absolutely shred you if you're not in cover. The final Devastator variant is the Berserker. I originally thought this guy was a different unit, but upon further inspection, it's just a really beat up Devastator. If the theory about automatons being captured Helldivers is true, then these guys are what they become. Although their armor is messed up and they may have no ranged capability, their ability for intimidation is insane. Something about seeing these guys with their glowing red skulls and brutal trophies walking towards you while revving their chainsaw arms makes them unforgivable. The final infantry is the Hulk, and I'm glad because this thing is massive and straddles the line between infantry and armor. The most standard variant is the Bruiser with a laser cannon and rocket launchers. The Scorcher takes inspiration from the Berserker with barbaric spike and skull trophies. It also shares the misuse of industrial equipment. Owing to the name, it also has a flamethrower, which has a much longer range than you think it has. The final variant is the Obliterator, toting dual rocket launchers and staying back to provide support. For some reason, this guy is used as the main art for Hulks, even though it's the rarest variant, getting the Behemoth treatment and only showing up on elimination and evacuation missions. Although they have different accessories, all Hulk variants have the same armor profile. You're supposed to be heavy walking tanks, but whatever cyborg or AI designed this thing must have been smoking something because all of that heavy armor is rendered completely useless due to these massive weak points. The head is right there and only medium armor, dying to a couple autocannon shots. There's also its entire back, which has very light armor and can be damaged by literally any weapon. All vehicles have a big blip on the map. The first vehicle is the Scout Strider. This chicken walker has the Devastator's cannon mounted to its chin, so it acts like a lighter and faster version of the Devastator. I should probably mention the elephant in the room, that being this little guy on the back, who is this thing's Achilles heel. If you haven't noticed, most automatons are weak to flanking. The next vehicle is the tank. This isn't really a main battle tank and more like a light tank, kind of like the Lightning from PlanetSide 2. It's pretty easily countered by getting up close and running around it and targeting the vents on the back. The bots attempted to counter this by doing a Germany and replacing the cannon with an anti-air gun. This makes it more resistant to flanking, but certain armor panels had to be removed to fit the turret, so it is much weaker. This faction's super heavy is the Factory Strider. These guys are much stronger than their bug counterpart, with armor that can walk off direct 500 kilogram bomb hits, and armaments that consist of a big f***off cannon and dual chin-mounted miniguns. As the name implies, it's also a mobile factory and can deploy a retinue of Devastators. The strategy for these guys is to detooth them. Their miniguns have relatively weak armor, and the main cannon can be disabled by a couple hits from anti-tank munitions. When it comes to weak points, there's a medium armor eye and radiators on the back, but the real sweet spot is the undercarriage. Let me explain. In order to deploy the aforementioned Devastators, it needs to stand still and open its undercarriage. There's a period before and after the Devastators are deployed where it stays open. This is when you should throw every grenade and fire every explosive weapon you have into the undercarriage. I should also mention that it is much slower than the Biotitan and very susceptible to stratagems. Moving on to the Air Force, we have the gunship. This is probably one of the coolest enemy designs in my opinion, but to most players they probably look like this, because I guess all Helldivers have astigmatism. Welcome to my world, normies. Their armor consists of a machine gun and rocket pods that can easily kill you and route you out of cover. They only have medium armor, but can simply dodge most attacks. Like their bug counterparts, they need a specialized spawner that counts as a tactical objective, but unlike Shriekers, they don't just sit there and watch, but will actively try to destroy the hell bomb, so you gotta have a shield relay on hand or be ready to sacrifice yourself. After the gunship, we got the dropship. This thing is super versatile, being able to carry everything from a platoon of troopers to an entire factory strider. This thing forms the backbone of the entire Automaton army. Compared to the bug's tactic of burrowing underground, this has some advantages and disadvantages. For some advantages, you always know where a bug breach can happen, so you can shut it down with things like sentries, gas, or napalm. You only know where a dropship will deploy right before it does. On top of that, multiple dropships will come, so you can't just focus on a single area. Another advantage is that while bugs have to follow Tiberian sun rules and can't burrow through concrete or rocks, bots can be dropped pretty much everywhere. The massive disadvantage is that the dropship is pretty weak, and if one of its 4 thrusters are damaged, it will spin out and crash into the ground, killing or heavily injuring every bot it's carrying. This means that no matter how strong a bot is, it doesn't matter because a single shot from an anti-tank weapon will cause it to crash into the ground at high speeds. The final automaton branch I want to talk about are defensive emplacements. The first is the contact mine, and you really shouldn't be dying to this thing because it may be an insta-kill, but it's also huge, glowing red, and emits a pulsing sound effect, so you have to actively try to die from these things. Before anyone gets mad in the comments, the bugs also have a mine, but it's so irrelevant I didn't even bother to mention it. The next defensive emplacements are the turrets. These come in 2 flavors, a fast-firing machine gun and a slower, heavier laser similar to what the Devastator wields. These are seen at outposts and some objectives and can be controlled by any trooper. Yes, even the ones with swords for hands. Don't ask me how, but it works. They provide medium armor to the trooper, but I would suggest not fully destroying them because you can use them as well. The cannon towers cannot be controlled and take inspiration from Nod by just being tank turrets on concrete pillars. The other form of heavy defense are the mortar emplacements. These count as tactical objectives and will begin shelling you once you enter their range. They are obviously high priority targets and should be destroyed ASAP. The best way to take them out is by entering the little trench they're in and calling in a hell bomb or just destroying the radiators. But if you can't get close, you can use some of your own artillery. I know you're probably thinking, Isaac, you said there were 2 enemy factions. Who the hell are these guys? Well, the Illuminate are from Helldivers 1, which I've never played, but by searching around online, I get the gist. They're fancy xenophobic space wizards like the Protoss or Aldari. That, and their favorite color is purple. But what does this have to do with Helldivers 2, though? Well, there have been some unconfirmed sightings, but the real site is that some leakers have found models for Illuminate units in the files that we might have, I don't know, opened a portal to their home. I don't know how I turned a section about 2 enemy factions in this game into 5 chapters, but here we are. The environments of these planets can be as dangerous as the bots and bugs if you're not careful. I mentioned planetary modifiers earlier in the video, but I want to go further in depth about them. The most simple is temperature. Hot planets cause you to get exhausted quicker and will also cause your laser weapons to overheat quicker. On cold planets, they heat up slower, but conventional firearms fire slower. Every biome also has their own version of a storm. They all do the same thing and slow you down while severely limiting your sight. This isn't to be confused with the Ion Storm that interrupts communication with his super destroyer, disabling stratagems and making the minimap useless. There are also some disasters. Tremors slow everything down and make you do the yoinky sploinky. Volcano detritus and meteors can rain down and kill you instantly, so I suggest finding cover. There's also fire tornadoes. You can't hide. The geography can also be a danger. I'll fall into giant pits while distracted looking at something like my map. Kids these days, am I right? Water is also a huge danger because all those arms and armor are pretty heavy, so Helldivers can't swim and just sink immediately. If you have to cross a river, then I suggest using your radial menu to drop everything, especially samples, because everything you carry with you will sink as well and become irrecoverable. There are also some plants that can be, for lack of a better word, detonated. You got these spiky plants that are really dangerous, these ice ones that slow everything in an area. You also got these spore mushrooms that can release smoke, but are used by the speedrunning community as a form of fast travel. Finally, there's the completely naturally occurring undetonated hell bomb. The thing other than stratagems that turned this game from a decent horde shooter to a Game of the Year material is the community. The amount of camaraderie I feel towards people I know nothing about and will never see again is immense. And it isn't like that fake DRG stuff where people are like, the game is literally designed to force you to work together, and then proceed to freeze the scout main with a cryo cannon. For the lulz. Look, I don't have any beef with Deep Rock. I've owned it since 2022, but I'm calling it like I see it, and the further I am from my teammates in that game, the safer I feel. The friendly perk exists for a reason. So what makes this community feel so together? I'm glad you asked. The galactic map isn't just for show, and is what you and every other player sees. The planets aren't just scenery changes, they all have a liberation amount, and every player contributes to them when completing a mission. We're fighting an entire war where you need to coordinate and switch between gaining new territory and defending enemy attacks. Major orders also add to this a lot. From the way I describe them, they may seem like generic, get a collective million kills for some currency. Well, the things it asks you to do are simple, the lore is definitely not. Major orders are campaigns that the whole community works towards. These make up the plot of the game. That's right, the plot of the game is actively developing and by player hands, depending on if major orders are failed or completed, and also what's popular in the community. To really hammer the point home, I want to give 3 examples of this game's community being great. There are countless hells in this galaxy. There is only one Malevelon Creek. Situated in the Severin sector, Malevelon Creek was one of the first planets ever fought on, as in right when the game was released on February 8th. This was before the Second Galactic War even started and was still considered a special military operation. The combination of the inexperience of the Helldivers combined with a swampy jungle biome caused the creek to become a bloodbath, sensibly dubbed Robot Vietnam. Despite heavy losses, the Helldivers still fought, but on February 28th, the Automatons launched a powerful counterattack and a retreat order was issued. Soon after the Creek fell, the rest of the Severin sector fell to the bots. This was the fall of Malevelon Creek. Our reach, Arcadia. Some Helldivers disobeyed the retreat order due to, well, a bug involving operations, but we'll just call it determination. A group of divers called the Creekers stayed on the creek and fought an intense guerrilla warfare. Remember, the entire sector was under automaton control, so the Creekers were cut off from any support but still fought on. Eventually, Operation Swift Disassembly started, a string of major orders with the goal of finishing off the automatons once and for all. With the power of the entire Seaf, we blitzed through automaton territory. One of the final bot strongholds was Malevelon Creek itself. On April 1st, the reinforcements combined with veteran Creekers finally retook the creek. However, the next day the Automatons attempted a final desperate all-out counterattack, utilizing their new factory striders and gunships. This pitiful death throw was countered in 9 hours by the combined community, and on April 3rd, the last bullet fired, final bot fabricated, and final stratagem called. This was declared Malevelon Creek Memorial Day, and all Helldivers present were awarded a cape. Meridia is often considered the bug version of Malevelon Creek, and while I personally don't think anything will come close to that narrative masterpiece, the tale of Meridia shouldn't be forgotten, as it will probably have importance in the near future. Situated in the Umlaut sector, Meridia was once a shining blue pearl with warm oceans and lush forests filled with life. The planet itself might have seemed insignificant, but where it was most certainly not. The Umlaut sector formed what could best be described as an astronomical wall that all Termanids had to go through to attack any other sector. Because of this, Meridia and her friends, Fenrir, Turing, and Arata Prime, were all granted the moniker Barrier Planet. Eventually, a compound called Termicide was discovered that would supposedly only kill Termanids. Someone got the bright idea to fill the atmosphere of all the barrier planets with it, effectively permanently halting the Terminid advance. Operation Valiant Enclosure was launched, a string of major orders with the goal of constructing, defending, and activating this Terminid control system. And it worked! With the bugs at bay, we were free to begin Operation Swift Disassembly. However, deep in the barrier planets, something dark was stirring. You see, Terminid hives sprawled deep underground, so deep that a very low dose of termicide reached them, and due to a phenomenon called hormesis, they were strengthened, became immune to termicide, and kicked the reproductive cycle into overdrive. Soon the entire Umlaut sector was overrun by genetically superior bugs pumping out more bugs, who managed to disable the TCS on every planet besides poor Meridia. This once blue pearl was corrupted into a sickly yellow super colony. The boosted reproduction rates allowed the Termanids to invade nearby planets and absolutely overran our defenses. This, along with the automaton reclamation, led to the official declaration of the Second Galactic War, and these were dark times. Being attacked on both fronts by revitalized armies and failing major order after major order, eventually we came up with a solution to our problems: destroy Meridia. Operation Enduring Peace began, a final push by all remaining Super Earth forces to pierce through the bug lines and reach Meridia. When we finally reached Meridia on May 30th, it was completely different. The once blue skies were a choking brownish yellow smog, serving as a grim warning of what would happen if the bugs ever reached Earth. As one Reddit post described it, a planet-sized bug colony covered in a thin layer of soil. The planet itself is hostile and had the highest bug volume ever seen. Swarms of shriekers poured out of the ground and blotted out the sky. This was probably one of the highest casualty major orders ever. It got so bad I had to bust out my expert art skills. But every sacrifice was necessary to pump the dark fluid, an Illuminate technology with the goal of imploding the planet. On June 2nd, Meridia collapsed in on itself and formed a black hole, ruining the Terminid offensive. However, that isn't where the story ends. Don't tell my democracy officer this, but I found this research document, and let me just paraphrase this. There are sounds emitting from the singularity, which if you know anything about black holes, should be impossible. Upon viewing the singularity, a veteran of the First Galactic War started screaming, quote, "They're coming back." Also, the first thing you learn about black holes is that light cannot escape them, yet this singularity emits a bright purple light. All of this evidence led the community to the same conclusion. It's not a black hole, it's a wormhole. and something is coming. This is a major order you won't hear on any official Super Earth records. It was a major order issued by the community itself, and some may consider it treachery. This was an IRL major order, and because of how serious it is, I'm not going to do the whole immersion thing. Helldivers 2 may have been developed by Arrowhead, but it was published by Sony, so they had the final say in some things. On May 2nd, a grim announcement was released. All players would need a PSN account to be able to continue playing. There were so many things wrong with this. First of all, PSN takes a lot of information, is susceptible to hackers, and is suspected spyware. Also, people who didn't make a PSN account wouldn't be able to play the game they paid for. The final nail in the coffin was that PSN had pretty coverage, and 117 countries would not be able to connect to the PlayStation Network, and again, couldn't play the game they paid for. Now, while there were some loyalist Sony fanboys, their flawed, blatantly false, and at some point xenophobic logic was pushed away by the sane majority of the community. We all realized that Sony was doing this to capitalize off the popularity, so we would make Helldivers 2 the least popular game on Steam. Boycotts, review bombings, 11,000 gesture awards, but on May 6th, we won, baby! Sony backed down. Although it may have left its scars, this is why I love Helldivers 2 so much. We were able to come together as a community and beat the billion-dollar company. You may have noticed in those first two tales, I talked about them in the context of the game. This is because the community follows a simple rule. Everything is canon. This isn't like other media where the writers just give up and everyone is like, hehe, my porn is canon. Every update isn't just to update, it's new technology being researched. I know a lot of games say this, but it actually has some merit here. When the first exosuit pattern was being developed, they mentioned some random planet where it was being made. However, this planet was invaded by bots and the devs were like, you're not getting your update until it's liberated. There's so many more examples. Stats tracker not working? Spies. Hotfix to stop enemies from spawning right next to the defense objective? Sonic repellers. This isn't a review, this is recruitment propaganda, and so much more. Someone in the comments has probably called me a traitor already because of something I said, and I'm all for it. It reminds me of the good old days of 40k. This game has taken over my life, and this 4th of July damaged my already shattered grip on reality. Everybody shouting about freedom, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, apple pie. Did I say freedom? Wow, 3 Command & Conquer references in 2024. You've obviously got your bad apples. There's your meta sweats, and while it's nice to know things that work well, the people I'm talking about are the ones who kick you from their public lobby for not having the newest optimal loadout. They're also huge crybabies and will have temper tantrums online whenever their favorite overpowered meta gun is rightfully nerfed. There's also the brain-dead Warzone kiddies who think this is a PvP game. To be fair, there are a lot of unintentional team kills from stratagems or just poor coordination. Call in their reinforcement, and if it's really heinous, use quick chat. The final group that definitely doesn't get enough hate are the, Yeah, that works. These people get really mad when people don't play the game that they want them to, specifically when it comes to major orders. They believe, if you don't do the major orders, then you shouldn't play the game at all. Yes, someone actually said that. These guys will harass people online and trick people into lobbies before switching to the major order. They also just have a hatred towards the Creekers and completely disrespect all the sacrifices they made. Look, the Creekers were kind of cringe at some point, but death threats are not it, Chief. People don't seem to recognize that not everyone plays this game religiously. I mean, I've been singing this game's high praises, but I haven't been playing it that much. I mean, I've been on shore leave because of things like school, and ironically, working on this video. But that doesn't matter. You don't need to do the major orders to love this game. You know, you're having a rough day at work, come home, wife is dead, and the dog left you. Playing difficulty 3 solo with a flamethrower is a great de-stressor. Something you gotta know about me is that I spend way too long on Instagram than I probably should. And that's how I found out about a lot of games. I found the material for some of my videos from there, and I have for future videos as well. It was gameplay clips that convinced me to get the game in the first place. Tales of Valor from the Creek inspired me to enlist. If you really want to enhance your experience, and I highly suggest doing the equivalent of following and joining the communities on your social media platform of choice. This is a great way to keep up to date with what's happening, share memes, learn powerful new stratagems, look at leaks, and most importantly, coordinate. You see, some major orders aren't so straightforward, and sometimes choices need to be made. This specific major order made us choose between protecting a children's hospital and a cache of anti-tank mines, a new stratagem. Look, I'm not a monster, but this was pretty soon after the Meridia implosion, and fears of an Illuminate invasion were at an all-time high. Safe to say, I was torn. But then I saw someone say something along the lines of, we Helldivers are first and foremost defenders of humanity. If we betray our values for military might, then we are nothing better than the soulless automatons we fight. I don't know how I managed to leave this out of the script, but after completing the major order and choosing the children, the devs actually donated to a children's charity. Even if you're on shore leave like me, it's nice to know what's going on. However, I would advise against joining the official Discord server. To be fair, I've never been on the server myself, but from what I've heard online, it's a constant war between the moderators who go on power trips and the collective angst of this world's 14-year-olds. Don't join unless you want to lose all your respect for the community, possibly be called a slur, and then be banned for using the wrong emoji. I'd be a fool not to talk about the legend himself. Once the CEO of Arrowhead, he did the unthinkable and interacted with the community. This extends to the dev team as a whole, but his Twitter account would commonly interact with the community in a genuine way. He was also super humble, publicly talking about the flaws and uncertain future of Helldivers 2. He told people to review bomb the game during the Betrayal. I can't begin to imagine how it feels to watch your child be destroyed online because of corporate greed out of your control. You may have noticed that I was referring to him in the past tense, and you're probably wondering if there was a scandal or a tragedy or something. No, he's fine. He just did something that made my respect for him skyrocket. He stepped down as CEO and became the CCO so he could work closer with the community. I also want to talk about who wrote the soundtrack for the game and did a great job smoothly transitioning into fan content. There's also some music written by the community. There's a lot of good ones, but if I had to pick my favorite, it'd probably be anything by Jonathan Young. I don't know how he does it, but everything that man makes is a banger. In fact, there's a lot of bangers in the community. Fan films, cosplays, hell, even the comic dubs are great. I know comic dubs are usually viewed as the worst of the community, but these are really good. I also need to talk about animations. There's a lot of great animations, but my favorite has to be this complete remake of the ARC Trooper scene from the 2003 Clone Wars series. Speaking of Star Wars, there's also mods. I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Before we go on to the conclusion, I want to list off some criticisms because nothing is perfect and I don't want a bunch of losers calling me a meat rider, if they haven't already. First of all, this game didn't go on sale in the summer sale. I know it was pretty soon after the game release, but I strongly believe that all games should participate in the summer sale. I don't care how good you say it is. I really like this whole live service evolving story thing, but I can understand its flaws. It gives the game a limited lifespan because the war will eventually end or just become super boring. This also makes the game unappealing to new players because they missed out on so much. Like when I got one of my friends to buy the game, I had to sit in a Discord call with him for an hour and explain everything that happened. What else? This game is kind of a resource hog, although I can't really talk because my graphics card is on the lower end. Also, this game is always online. You can't even log in without being connected to the internet. I'm fine with that, and I know it's for the whole galactic war, but it would be cool if there was like a single player training mode or something. This is probably the only section where I can talk about the bugs. No, I'm not doing the joke. I've had to constantly revise this section because the devs just keep on patching them. You've got your visual glitches like these weird question marks, armor not loading in, and messed up levels. These don't affect gameplay, but what does are the physics glitches. Sometimes you can clip into the environment. This has gotten rarer with every update, but it's always good to carry at least one explosive with you. I'm not going to pretend I know how game engines work, but this game uses a lot of ragdolls. It's not source levels of ragdoll antics, but it's still pretty intense. Your body can bend at weird angles, and the real problem is launching. I talked about the speedrun mushrooms before, but these are nothing compared to this. The enemies aren't safe either. I like to call this Android Heaven. Wow, we're finally here. The end of the video. I know this video was pretty long, but believe it or not, there's a lot of things I didn't go over. Boosters you can take with you on missions, the 380mm orbital barrage that ends all life in a 50-meter radius, or the support weapon that I will not name because it scares me. This thing can instantly kill some of the most powerful units in the game, but at the same time it can misfire and end your life. Hell, I didn't even talk about Joel. Once the boogeyman of all Helldivers faded into irrelevance after people came to better understand the game's mechanics. Anyway, long story short, like I said in the intro, this is just to pique your interest and tell you things I wish I knew. Although, that enemy section was pretty long, but this is my first time making a review video. And I would love comments and constructive criticism. I promise I won't roast you, unless you're being a jerk. Actually, I know a lot of YouTubers say this, but if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. This is my first review video, and dare I say it, real YouTube video that isn't just a post or a barely edited gameplay video. Thank you. Sentimental stuff aside, although most headlines about plummeting player count are exaggerated and borderline rage bait, our numbers are lower than they used to be. With the Second Galactic War in full swing and a new enigmatic foe soon to come, now is a great time to
Join the Helldivers.
Reminder, all personnel must submit weekly urine sample by 0400.
What?